We have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Luke here. Luke, you've built up this incredible game, Pixels, that has gotten so much scale today. I mean, it's really fascinating how you started this while you were like working, I think, on a dairy farm in New Zealand, and have been able to build this up, to millions of users, great amount of revenue, and really build something dynamic and fun that takes advantage of the principles of Web3 in a way that's really useful and interesting. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Yeah, no, thanks so much for having me. This is gonna be a fun one, I feel like.
Awesome. So, kind of just going back to what made you interested in gaming, entrepreneurship, and talking a bit about like your origins. I mean, growing up, I think in an area maybe where entrepreneurship may not have been as common. Can you just talk about like how this passion arose for you and how you went on this path?
Yeah, I grew up in Michigan, kind of by Detroit, and like where I'm from, I like to describe it as like probably the most stereotypical suburban American
Mhm.
place that you can think about. People there are not risk takers. Like they live like more secure, safe lifestyles. Like it's a nice place to grow up. I really have no complaints. But also, I guess I was kind of a bit of a black sheep growing up there. Also, yeah, I guess I kind of started learning how to code when I was like 12 years old. And funny enough, making video games. It was one of those things that was not celebrated over there. Like nobody I knew growing up had anything to do with tech, anything to do with like computers, software, any of that. Like really the only major employer in Michigan at that time was like the auto companies like Ford. So you did have some people's parents who were engineers, but like more mechanical. And yeah, I just was not exposed to the world of tech or software at all. So I actually hid the fact that I was learning how to code when I was really young, because there's also like negative social connotations with it where I'm from too. It's not kind of like
Yeah.
growing up in the Bay Area where it's more celebrated by parents. So yeah, I learned how to code really young, and I knew I did want to go out and try to like leave the state, which is a big deal growing up there. Not many people leave their hometowns where I'm from, and my intention was always like learn how to code, go to school, learn how to be a software engineer, and then go work for a tech company because I saw some movies that had like this depiction of like what these companies like Google were like working at. I thought that would be so cool. That was kind of my end goal. And I went out and did that. I studied at the University of Michigan. I did a double degree, computer science and economics. I thought the economics degree was going to be kind of useless, but I actually ended up just like really, really enjoying it. And then I went to go work at a company in Silicon Valley called Workday for about a year and a half. As I was, studying in college, though, I discovered a lot of other outside interests. And I knew like I probably wouldn't fit into like a typical 9 to 5 lifestyle. It's just really like I don't fit into that normal box, whatever it is. So I kind of had built like a different plan. My plan was to go and work at a company for about a year and a half and then go off and do my own thing. So I worked at Workday for a year and a half. I learned a lot about how like big businesses work, how software is built at scale. It was good. I'm really thankful for that experience. And then, I did quit my job and I moved to New Zealand. And the intention was to kind of go and start my own thing. I was following Peter Levels for a long time there, the Levels IO person who was doing indie hacking and bootstrapping. And I thought I really wanted to do that. So that was kind of my intention. Go in and like try to make as much money as I had been making as a software engineer, doing some of my own little micro SaaS business myself. And yeah, I basically lived in New Zealand. I was traveling around. I like, lived on a dairy farm, lived in surf hostels for a little bit, even on sailboats for a little bit. And as I was doing that, I would be coding basically every single night. And as I was doing that, I was taking on a little bit of freelance work, making some money. It seemed like I was going in the right direction towards achieving that goal. I actually had started building this product that was kind of like a virtual meeting space for people. And that was during COVID when I was doing that. And this little product ended up getting a lot more initial traction than I'd ever expected. So I wanted to see if I could productize that a little bit. I started showing it to some people. We started getting some customers doing that. And I decided, okay, maybe I can actually take this like kind of the startup route. It was never my intention. It's never really where I meant to go. But yeah, I started to focus just on that one product and seeing if I could kind of scale revenue, scale users, do all of that. The next year and a half was kind of a struggle of trying to make that work. I basically self-funded for almost, a year, maybe a little bit longer. And then finally, after a year of just like trying to make this thing grow, trying to like build it out further, um, you know, we got the interest of one investor. I was basically almost completely out of personal runway. I was like pretty tight. That was a godsend. We had like somebody that basically took a risk on us because we didn't really have any significant traction. We didn't really have any And I say we, that's the royal we, it was just me. Um, we didn't really have any like significant users, revenue, any of that. But after talking with this person for a long time, they just decided they liked me. And I brought on a co-founder at that time too. We started, tinkering around with this a little bit more. And yeah, we were working on that for like 6 months to like 8 months, a little bit further. We couldn't really get it anywhere. It seemed like the end of the journey was near again. Like I tell people this, I was literally after like 6 months of working on that product, after we raised like a little bit of money, it was like $100,000. We had like built a lot of product, we learned a lot of lessons. It just like wasn't working this product. The core thesis was wrong. And I kind of accepted that. I was like, okay, I tried this startup thing. I think my journey's over. I started driving over to a potato farm because I just wanted to kind of like be somewhere I could soft land. So I was like, okay, I like contact this potato farm. I was like, okay, maybe I can like stay here for a little bit. I'll have like free rent. I'll help them out, and then like I'll get my bearings, and then I'll go and like do whatever else. Maybe go get a job again. As I'm driving to this potato farm, I'm driving from like my parents' home in Michigan over to Idaho. When I'm in Colorado on the way, we get like another call from an investor saying, "Hey, we know you guys applied to the startup accelerator. We weren't going to let you in. We had like a last second opening though. If you could be in San Francisco in 2 days, then we have a spot for you, and we'll give you a little bit more funding." So I took that offer. I was really excited to work on the potato farm, but I literally just continued driving straight to San Francisco. I got there like 4 hours before this like startup accelerator started. I literally hadn't slept. I walked in, and then yeah, we continued the journey. And yeah, after that it was like a little bit more tinkering, still trying to figure some stuff out. And eventually, when that business was like really not working, we tried one more time to pivot. And I basically was finally willing to throw away everything that we built over the last year and a half, 2 years, and start something completely fresh. We had a tiny bit of money left. I tried like 30 business ideas in 30 days towards that end period. And one of the things that I tried out was basically demoing out a game and showing this to people. And we integrated a bit of like crypto concepts into it, where we had an NFT that you could walk around as a character inside of the game. And I posted it on Twitter. And it finally got like a lot of traction in terms of Twitter traction. That was the first time I'd ever built anything that people really cared about, were genuinely interested, and like wanted to see more of. And I went from like just posting that demo on Twitter to raising a pre-seed round within like a month and a half. So it was a really, really crazy quick turnaround. And yeah, that was end of 2021. I've been doing like that specific idea for 4 years now, just building, iterating, and like basically making it better every single week, every single month. And yeah, we started from just like absolutely nothing to growing over to like, 10, 11 million registered users. And yeah, a decent amount of revenue. But yeah, it's just been kind of like bringing that scrappy ethos from the very beginning stages of like, not making any assumptions of what I'm doing is working, iterating, building with people, testing out feedback in public, all of that. So that's kind of like the journey in a nutshell.
So, do you, like, what specifically from that startup accelerator was so helpful besides like the capital and the cash to keep going? But like, was there something you really took away from it that enabled you to get in the right direction?
Yeah, so that accelerator was called XX. I'm really sad it's not running anymore, but it was kind of like a YC offshoot. And I am so thankful. It was probably the most impactful experience I've had as a founder to this day. It was really different what they focused on. They focused on kind of like the mental aspect of being a founder, and more of like the journey and making sure that people were ready to go out and do this thing for real, rather than like getting so dialed into metrics and revenue and all of this, because they were trying to get founders really, really early before they had traction, before they had revenue. And they did a few things that were very, very helpful. One, I got to sit down with a partner every single week who was just extremely dialed in and was really, really good at poking and asking questions on like figuring out, is this the right thing to be doing at all? Rather than focusing on like, were you productive? Did you get a lot of code written? It's like, really think about the business. Like, is this the right kind of business to even be building in the first place? Do you want to do this? Is this interesting to you? And then the other thing they did was they brought in a lot of really successful founders in person for closed fireside chats that were off the record. And a lot of my takeaways from that were more around like the higher questions of like purpose and why am I doing a startup? And like what makes these people tick, basically. I remember this is like weird, but it is relevant. Like I saw a really, really common theme of successful founders coming in. giving like a fireside chat about how amazing their business was, talking about their successful exits. And then oftentimes they would basically also talk about how they would have a great exit, would have no idea what to do with their lives, and then start another company. And I really picked up on that, where it's like, okay, wait, why are these people starting companies? Like, do they know anything outside of company building? Like, is company building just all of their life, right? Or is there really any end goal to this too? Now, it's funny because my opinions have changed, but that also got me really dialed in, where it's like, okay, if I'm going to spend the next 4 to 7 years of my life going out and building a company, I better have a good reason to do it. And I better have an end goal, and I better have a purpose, and I better be extremely intentional about it, because I want to make sure that if I'm doing this, it's for something. And at the time I thought it was, for freedom, and actually my purpose has changed a lot. But just that thinking and that mindset of like, being really intentional with the building process, I think motivated me a ton over the next 4 years.
Yeah, I think it makes sense what you're saying to have a deeper purpose there, because this is such a big piece of your life, and you have to find something that really resonates with you well. And you also have the right partners now. I mean, you've got funding from Animoca. I mean, they've invested in tons of them, and I know we've had Yada on the podcast as well. I mean, he could even be, a great mentor. So you've got also some good people around you too that can help you understand that longevity piece. When you were, after you had this like viral, video on Twitter that blew up, like how did you kind of go from there to actually building out V1 of the game? What did you think was going to be the most, I guess, most comprehensive version of the game that you could offer at that point in time based on what you were capable of doing?
Yeah, so I'm a technical founder, right? So in the early stages, it was nuts. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but I was sleeping like 3 to 4 hours a night for months at a time. I was doing all of the fundraising. I was building all of the products. It was really me and like one or two other people. The other people were helping with like art and like a bit of the logistics and operations, right? So that was interesting. You can only do that for so long, right? When you're early and when you are like experiencing like something that's working for the first time, like young energetic founders have a crazy power to them, where they can unlock something that like I don't know if I could go there again, to be honest. But yeah, there was so much excitement in finally building out something that was finally working after like being in a dark area of like, no PMF for a long time, right? Where I was so motivated, I was just like coding nonstop, talking to investors nonstop, and I somehow made it work. Eventually we put together a team. But that took a little bit of time to like actually build the right team. That took like 6, 7 months to like actually get an engineering team spun up and actually productive. But yeah, the ethos in that whole time period still was, talking with the people using the product as much as possible. I was in Discord 24/7, also talking with every single user. I was the number one most active chatter or like talker in our Discord for like the first 2 years of the product. Now I don't have as much time to be in there 24/7. We have people that love the game that are in there 24/7. So I can't be the top. But that was a superpower in the early stages. I knew exactly what the problems were. I knew exactly what the community and the users wanted. And I was, actively updating them on like all of our ideas too, like in real time. It's brutal. It's brute force. It takes a lot out of you, but it was super worth it. And I don't think the product would have gone as far as it did if I didn't have that mindset in the beginning stages.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's good that you had that energy then too, as well, to pull it off. Yeah. So when you think about Luke, like building in public, right? Because it's an interesting strategy to take. On one hand, it probably can cut down on your marketing budget a lot, or whatever you have to do marketing wise, right? Because you're always putting stuff out there. But also, it exposes what you're doing, to more people right away. And maybe it can reveal things, to reveal too much. There's kind of trade offs to stuff like that. How has building in public, besides that initial, phase of getting you that helping lead to funding, how has building in public been really beneficial for you as you've went since?
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, because when you're building in public, what you want to do is you want to build like empathy with your audience, right? So what's great is because we update and make the audience feel like they're a part of our decision making, because they are. Like, I think it's silly to not consult them, because what you want to do is you want to build a product that people want to use. It is such a privilege and such a blessing to get the users that are directly using your product to give you feedback, right? Not everybody gets that, and it's super valuable. So you should take full advantage of that, right? Now, the thing is, when it comes to execution and tactics, like your audience won't always be dialed into some of the other problems of building a business. Like when you have to make decisions on runway, or the fact that you can't build everything at once all the time, right? Like an audience or a community can tend to be a little impatient when it takes time to build really hard things to build. And they're not always as understanding or graceful there, right? So it's a double-edged sword, building in public, right? You get this amazing source of feedback. You start to build almost like a parasocial relationship with your audience too, kind of like how streamers do, right? Where if you can do that, you can build a better product quicker. You get a lot more grace when you make mistakes too, because if you make a mistake and you are like really building with community, then the community is also somewhat responsible for mistakes too, right? But on the other side too, right? Like not everybody understands um, how hard it is to actually go and build something, right? So they're not going to be the ones that you go to and be like, oh, we're tight on runway, or oh, we had to make layoffs and we can't build this feature as fast as you guys want. And there's also so many competing interests sometimes too, so you have to be the one that kind of discerns like whose feedback actually is like the stuff to listen to, because just because the community asks for something doesn't mean it's the right thing to do all the time either, and that can also lead to some mistakes. If you just build everything the community wants, you might not build something that lasts. Like a good example is, businesses do have to make money at the end of the day. And if you ask the community what you should do with monetization inside of a product, they would probably be like, no monetization, make it all free, right? Like they don't really understand the trade-offs of all of this stuff. So you have to make some compromises, and you have to also make sure that you're like balancing competing interests too. And if you really do have integrity, if you do believe that you're building the best product experience for a community, you can make decisions that are harder and still know that it's in their best interest. So yeah, a lot of the process too is like, learning that you don't have to be loved by everybody, but you can still show integrity and like build for the best of the community with that in mind. It's a interesting personal process to go through as somebody who maybe likes to be well liked by most people, but
I think we all do. Yeah. So you started with $200, and then you've been able to generate way more than that. I mean, in the millions in revenue. That's quite a change to go from that point of starting to build. I mean, seriously bootstrapping to where you are now. How have you adjusted as like an operator, as a business leader, Luke, like to be able to kind of handle that type of change?
yeah, I mean, I think knowing the value of money is extremely important. And there's a lot of people that get a little bit out of touch with that, right? Knowing how to do every single job in your business is extremely important also. And knowing what to build when you're constrained is also important. It's interesting because if you're not mindful about that, you can forget, even if you have been there. And it's interesting because in the earlier stages of company building, when we were more resource constrained, I would not say that we were moving any slower than we have been when we're, less resource constrained, right? And actually, sometimes the constraints are better for a business because you have to focus more and you have to really think about the things that really move the needle, because you can't do 4 things at once. You can only do one. And, that's been a lesson as we have been like, less constrained too. I'm the kind of person that has so many ideas, and it's a little ADHD sometimes, where it's like, okay, if we do this and this and this, it'll like go and help us build an outcome. But truthfully, sometimes what I've been learning more recently is if I had just focused on one thing a little more tightly, and I didn't have to spend as much or burn as much to like really find the truth of the issue, it probably would have been better and quicker as well. So that scrappy mindset, I think, is so important throughout the entire stage of company building that you build in those early stages. It's easy to forget it. And it's easy to think, oh, if I just pour more money or more people into a problem, and it'll get solved faster or better. And that's not normally true, to be completely honest. But yeah, there also is like a nice side of it too, where, I can recruit better talent. I can, make sure that, we have enough time to like really solve the problems in the right way as well. Sometimes the short-term solution is not the best solution, though resource constraints could be good. You start to build out better discernment as you become a more tuned in founder, where it's like, no, a longer bet here would be really great, and I can actually sink a year into this without seeing the results. You have to be careful when you make those decisions, but sometimes it is worth it. It's not always black and white.
Right.
So that's kind of the like access that more capital and like more resources have bought. Like I can be a little bit more patient and like really go for a bigger outcome if I want.
Mm-hmm. So how have you kind of used Web3 differently, or just used it and made real innovation there? Because there is all the stigma around it and the associations of NFTs, positive and negative. How have you kind of figured out a real way that provides nice value to implement Web3 with, Luke?
Yeah, so Web3 is a funny industry because there's a negative connotation of it now, and I think it's deserved, right? And there was also maybe there, if you remove all the negative side of things, like there is a piece of the industry where there's been scams, there's been fraud, all of this kind of stuff. There's also been another side of the industry that's just been overly optimistic, and they're not being malicious, where they're like, oh, crypto payments will be used for everything. We're never going to use real money again. Bitcoin's going to be the only currency. That might be true in 10 years from now, but it's not the truth now. And people get a little over optimistic and jump the gun a little bit too. Like both of these things are kind of harmful when you're starting to build in this space, because what you really should be doing is should be seeking truth, right? And the truth is like what users actually want, how they actually interact with products. When you start to bring in your own opinions of what users should do or what users should want, that's the most dangerous thing for company building and like finding a product market fit. And I'm guilty of this too, where I'm like, oh, like I really think users should be using our product in this way. Like they're wrong. And our product's not going to work because they're wrong. No, that's the complete opposite. Like we are wrong for building a product that assumed that users would interact with the product in a certain way. And it's our job to build a product that they actually want. So what's interesting is we found a lot of emergent behavior as we've been building this space, and actually uncovering like a lot more truth of what users want and want to do and interact with, right? And it's not necessarily what a lot of the rest of even our industry thinks, but it's also uncovered like a ton of powerful user behavior as well too. So I mean, yeah, the biggest pitch I give to people on what we're doing is we grew to 10 million users on $0 of ad spend. Like
Wow.
there's something there, right? So that's kind of what we're thinking about. Like how can we start to like really uncover the truth of like what Web3 is doing for products and consumer, and like how can we actually build something that people want to be using.
Yeah, that's amazing. No ad spend to get to that point is incredible. Just the last question I have, Luke. Like, what are your future goals here? What does the next 5 to 10 years look like? How do you continue to scale this while implementing Web3 in a way that's authentic and just doing something different here?
Yeah. So we have a really big opportunity here to actually change the way that most consumer applications grow. Like, really, what I view Web3 as is an innovation on user acquisition. Like, the key thesis of what we're trying to do is like, we're trying to find a new way to grow games without spending money on traditional advertising. And the thesis is instead of spending money on ads, what if we just gave that same money directly to users for certain tasks or certain like types of behavior, and target it really precisely and grow the game basically bottoms up is the approach. So if we pull off what we're trying to pull off, it's very, very difficult. But if we do it, it's a huge opportunity. It's basically inventing a new UA channel that we kind of fully own in the beginning stages. It's a hard problem. It's possible. Somebody's going to do it eventually. And that opportunity is super exciting to me. So yeah, basically trying to go and create like a new market of UA is the end goal. And if we do it successfully, like we would probably be like in the same conversation as like an app supplier, as app Lovin, maybe Adjo, or like even like a Meta when it comes to like UA and distribution. That would be the end goal there. So it's ambitious. It's like a hard thing to do, and I wouldn't want to solve or like work on anything that I don't feel like is extremely hard. That's kind of the goal there.
Sounds good. Well, Luke, I appreciate you taking the time and doing this. I think what you've been able to accomplish here is pretty amazing, considering where you've started to where you are now. And your building in public is good. I mean, people get to see what you're up to, they get to learn, and they get to be more attached to the game. And so I love that that's what you're doing, and you've implemented Web3 in a way that's interesting, that adds value. And it's good you're sticking with it too, and you believe in it, even though now the hype is not the same as what it once was. So I'm just excited to see what's next, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it, man.